Hi, I'm Tim Deuce, psychologist, psychoanalyst, songwriter, musician. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about brain connectivity, which is about being incredibly smart just with the brain that you have. And it's possible to do that. It's possible to get so much more out of the brain that you have. I've lived on it for years, so trust me. Now, I want to tell you how I came across this because I stumbled on it, quite frankly. Back in the day when I was studying psychology, it came to finals time, and finals was a grim affair back then because you didn't have modules, you didn't sort of like win bits of degree as you went along. You had exams that just stopped you being thrown out, basically, if you passed them. But then you had to do everything. You're examined on the entire 3 years at the end of it all in one go. And they didn't bother to give us the exam date. And with no exam date, frankly, I couldn't get the motivation together to revise. I just couldn't get started. I kept trying, but I just couldn't do it. And then they sent us a letter revealing the exam date, 2 weeks notice. Now, I went into shock, I recall, and I went upstairs, sat on the bed. I was in a catatonic state for about 30 minutes. I did not move. And then I realized that I was going to have to do something. And if I was somehow going to be able to revise 3 years of work in 2 weeks and pass this exam, I would have to work very smart indeed. So my first thing was I looked at the past papers, the past paper of the year before and the year before that, and I started looking for common denominators. What were subjects that tended to appear in both of those papers? They might be worded a little bit differently, but basically kind of like the same sort of question around the same sort of area of the subject, and I found a goodly number of those. And then I started looking at all the different papers on all the different areas of psychology, and I started looking at all the kind of information that was required to answer those questions, and then looking at how I could recycle that same information from one paper and use it on a totally different paper. Now, this worked like a charm, actually. And by doing that, I was able to just recycle over and over and over again, going from paper to paper, but just rearranging the information and putting a whole different sort of slant on it so that it worked. I was able to pass the exam. Now, the reason I'm telling you this story is because of what I discovered about how my brain was working when I passed that exam. And the first clue I'd got, of course, during the course was when I learned that one of the best ways to retrieve information from your memory is by having as many connections as you can have. So if you have a piece of information, then rather than just remembering it as a piece of information, the more you can remember it in terms of, certainly, of course, what does it mean, but also how does it relate to everything else that you know? Does it agree with everything else you know? Does it disagree with everything else you know? Does it modify it? Does it improve it? Does it put a different slant on it? Does it make a more complete picture of it? Also, just in all kinds of ways, how does it relate to everything else you know and the rest of your experience, not just maybe an academic thing, but just your knowledge of the world and so on, and the way people behave or whatever. So I was thinking all of those things all the time, and that was really, really helping me to remember those things. But also, as I explained to you, I was getting maximum value out of each piece of information because I was recycling it. But then this other incredible bonus appeared. And that is that I've realized that by doing this, I ended up really understanding psychology as a whole. I got this overview of the subject, a kind of a complete understanding of the subject, which all came from basically relating and connecting all these bits of information, because it's not taught that way, or at least my course wasn't taught that way. It was all this experiment, that experiment, another experiment, this psychologist, that psychologist, another psychologist, this piece of information, that piece of information, another piece of information. It was just like it was just kind of like shoveled at you, like just bits of knowledge, just loaded onto you, and without any kind of conceptual sense at all. In fact, in my first term, I remember saying to a tutor, I said, isn't it not possible? I was only 19, pretty young guy, but hey, I wasn't that stupid. I said, hey, can we, I do feel what's missing here is some kind of conceptual overview, some kind of like sense of the subject as a whole. And he said, oh, well, we're not going to spoon feed you, which actually meant that he didn't know shit. But there we are. Anyway, so, and that's, never mind him. So, I had the last laugh, I guess, because at the end of it, I did know shit. I was able to really understand the subject. And here's this thing to do with connectivity, making connections when you remember something, when you memorize something. All the things that it's related to is going to help you to remember more easily. It's going to help you to retrieve the information from memory more easily. But it's also going to massively multiply your understanding, because it means that way you can use your whole brain, bring your whole brain to bear, and bring the information of your whole brain to bear on a particular problem or on a particular subject. So you might have heard of this new word, neuroplasticity, which psychologists are bandying around these days. It's been more recently discovered with with brain studies that as we learn, the brain actually reorganizes itself. And all these sort of like neuronal connections are all sort of, new connections are being made, unnecessary ones are being demolished, and it's constantly sort of like rewiring itself in order to be able to work as efficiently as possible. Now, if you tend to learn information in a very compartmentalized way, like this, this is all the information to do with this, and this is all the information to do with this, then your brain actually ends up being wired up in that very compartmentalized way. And it's very hard to be able to really think broadly. Whereas whenever you learn a new piece of information, you relate it to all the rest of the information that you have, then suddenly you find that your whole, that's helpful to you in itself. That's incredibly helpful to you as it is. But by doing that as a habit, your whole brain starts to become rewired in this hyper-connected way instead of a very locally connected kind of way. So you're much better at solving problems. And I want to give you just some little examples that from your own experience. You've seen how on a good day, when you're kind of like on top of your game, how you've got a problem maybe, and then you might something just pops into your mind that's really from somewhere else in your head entirely, but just puts a new slant on this problem and helps you to solve it. At the same time, there's the opposite to that. If you're a bit low, if you're tired, if you're stressed, panicky, low in self-confidence, lacking sleep, poor nutrition, just generally a bit rough, you've been ill, you tend to find that you can get stuck on a problem and the answer might just be over here, but you can't see it because you're kind of stuck. So from your own experience, you know of examples of where you were more connected and where you were less connected, and the difference it made to your ability to solve problems, to remember things, and to come up with, particularly with creative solutions and reworkings, adaptations of ideas into new forms and new shapes and so on. And that's the wonder of connectivity and how powerful it is. And so this practice of whenever you learn something new, connect it and see how it connects with the experience that you already have, with the knowledge that you already have. Where does it fit in with the knowledge that you already have, or where does it completely contradict the knowledge that you already have, or whatever? That is absolutely crucial to getting your brain working optimally, and you will find a whole different, you'll find that you're performing totally differently once you use connectivity in that way. So I'm committed over the next year. I'm going to be coming out with videos like this that will really make a big difference to what you're doing and how you're doing it and what you're putting into it, and more importantly what you're getting out of it. So that's the reason why I would like you please to subscribe and to give it a thumbs up, to put comments down there. Any other questions that you have about what I said, please put them down below and I will use those for further videos. And now I would suggest, if you want to shoot over to Spotify or to iTunes and check out Tim Duce, D-U-C-E. You can check out my songs, check out the music, and that way you can see what's happening with a creative, connected brain, and also it's just gonna make your day feel absolutely great. So have a wonderful day, and please apply the things that I've talked about today, and comment below and tell me how it works for you and the differences it makes to your life.